Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just going to tell you what I do. One master's in here. There's Pat Joe. All three of them. And I'm very grateful. Mom was at our house.
David, good morning. How are you? Okay, how are
Good. We got it this morning.
This morning?
Because we didn't get the mail on Saturday. And because we didn't. But it was in there. So he hasn't. No, he threw the mail in and he left because he had the dog and he got the mail. Yeah. But I saw it. Like I saw the. So I said, oh, good, yeah. And then there was another. Oh, really? And there was another email from Nancy Frank, who wrote an envelope and gave it and then even on the inside she was writing it to David. My mother stayed over last night and said, looking at the mail this morning, take my shit. My mother in that way, but the thought was definitely
Thanks for your kind words, Mary. Also got a card from you from the mail today, Kara. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Lynn. How are you?
Hi. And then I got an email from another mom who said she has a very I don't be careful what I did write back to her and say, bring it on. She said, I was just wondering if there was a place for us. For my son and I'm great.
Thank you, George.
How do you know?
Wait a minute.
Good morning. Would you join me as we light the chalice? The words are in your order of service. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together.
You want to hear the service? Want to say the service? Sure. Sit right over.
Watch.
Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Low Country. May we here find calm in times of restlessness. And may we here allow restlessness to evolve into action. And let this be the place you consider what you've never considered. Let this be the place you imagine yourself for yourself, something new and unthinkable. May this hour bring dreams of a new way of being in the world. Come, let us worship together. I pray that that happens here, that you begin to find ways to think newly about the world that you're living in, newly about yourself, and that become a transition to action inside your own hearts and inside your own spirit. Those of you that are guests and visitors today, I want to assure you that you have found your way into one of the kindest, most welcoming congregations that exists on the planet, in my opinion. And they don't pay me to say that. I see the way that you are, and I find myself delighted to be in front of you and also to introduce you to those who are new here today. I wanted to take just a moment to ask those of you who have not, those of you that are new, if you've not yet seen something like this before, keep an eye out for it. It's at the front. What we would like for you to do is take a few moments during the service today, and if you think that you have seen something, found something, be interested in something, and might want to actually come back, fill that out. We'd like to know who you are so we can stay in touch with you if you're willing to do that, and we promise not to sell your personal information to anybody anywhere under any circumstances. So those of you who are first or second time visitors here, if you're willing to stand where you are and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from, just for a moment. Yes, ma'am, if you would, please.
I'm Pat Carlton. I live in Sun City, and I was a Unitarian for 20 years at Cedar Lane in Kensington, Maryland, which was amazing. So I'm really happy to have found you, and it's thanks to my friend Lou and to Dick Hood.
Very nice. Thank you. I love that you've gone from one amazing congregation to another amazing congregation. Other first-time guests or visitors. Aye, thank you all for being here. Ann Harrison, I think you have an announcement that you'd like to make, so start to make your way up here for that. Thank you.
Just have one quick announcement, and that is, many of you know that on the 8th day of every month, I'm starting to sound like an old record, on the 8th day of every month, since last year, we've been having conversations about the adoption of an 8th principle. And if you're new here today, if there's someone here that doesn't know, for years and years there's been 7 principles, 7 values that we Unitarian Universalists try to live our lives by. And this addition of an 8th principle has been circulating around for years. And we've been talking about it, and we are planning to vote on it at our annual meeting at the end of this month, for our congregation to adopt it. So we are going to have one more conversation if we get enough people to sign up. So I know tomorrow is the 8th day of the month, but this month we're not going to do it on the 8th, as we have done a couple other months as well. But this month, on this Thursday at 4 o'clock, if we get enough people that would like to talk about it one more time, we'll have a little happy hour here at the church in the foyer. For any of you that would like to come, I ask that you sign up. We have a couple people who signed up already, but we would like a handful more to engage in the conversation. And there's a family with children coming through the front door. Oh my gosh! Woo! I just lost my train of thought. Yeah. And we have some other children already here, so life is getting better by the minute. Anyway, if you are interested in being part of that happy hour, sign up in the foyer, and I will see you here Thursday at 4 o'clock. Thank you.
Go. a couple other personal announcements I'd like to be able to make. Some of you may know that one of our longtime members, very active in our finance world, Phyllis Baxter, fell and broke her hip last week. She's had some surgery. She's recovering at Encompass. Thank you very much. So keep her in your heart. Reach out to her as best as you can, and Betsy Morehouse would be a good resource for you to go to. Betsy, raise your hand just real quick. So if you want to find out how best to contact her, contact back Phyllis. You can talk to Betsy. Also, some of you may know that a longtime member, he's been away from us for a bit, but he's passed away recently. Paul Brophy, who was very active in the life of this congregation over the years. He passed away recently. His service will be here at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So if you remember Paul, would like to be a part, please come back and take part of that for a little bit of time. Also, I want to thank my good friend Tim Garvey for his service on the board. Tim, in order to maintain his own sanity, has decided to step away from the board for a little bit. And when I first heard that, I thought, you can step away from the board? I didn't know that it was a lifetime punishment. No, Tim, thank you for your service, being willing to offer yourself, and we're sending good mojo at you. Okay? Thanks, Marge. All right? Let's see. Some of you know that I have an odd ministry that has been going on with Snickers bars, right? I've been handing them out from time to time. So Pam Green came up to me just a short while ago and she said, here's your Snickers bar. So I am going to pass this on to the next guy that deserves a Snickers bar. And it goes on, Pam, where are you? Thank you, that was delightful. Eventually I'll eat one. I think that that's all the announcements that I need to bring to our attention. If I've neglected something, we'll come back around to it later. Neal, you have opening words. Sure.
Thank you, Charlie, especially for the Snickers bar. Thank you. And it's good to be with you in person. I much prefer that than to be a big head on the screen. As you know, next Sunday is Mother's Day. And for some, that's a glad and easy celebration and remembrance. And for others, it's a day mixed with sorrow and regret for a relationship that once was, that is now gone, or for a desired relationship that never was. So, whether Mother's Day is glad or sad, during these moments of silence, may we give thanks for all those, living and dead, male and female, who have nurtured us. Let's take a few moments of gratitude for that. Now I invite you to stand in body or spirit for our first hymn, Spirit of Life, number 123. Let's stand together.
Oh
Now is the time in the service where we can share our joys and concerns. In this very loving community, it is a safe place to share your joy so that they may multiply and to get some support for the concerns that you have. If you would come forward and take a stone from the basket and then tell us your name and briefly what your joy or concern is, and then place the stone in the cairn. Please, no announcements or political statements. ones that you hold in your hearts. Would you join me now in today's affirmation, which is number 505 at the back of the hymnal. 505. Let us be at peace with our bodies and our minds. Let us return to ourselves and become wholly ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being, common to us all and to all living things. Evoking the presence of the great compassion, let us fill our hearts with our own compassion toward ourselves and toward all living beings. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other, with humility and with awareness of the existence of life and of the sufferings that are going on around us. Let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and on our earth. Amen.
So, one of the messages that Jesus taught was to love one another unconditionally. That there's no limit to the amount of love that we can have for every person, and that no matter what someone has done, we can always take them back and forgive them. To teach this message, Jesus told a story called the Prodigal Son. Today, we'll be hearing a message from Reverend Neal Jones called Mama's Boys and Prodigal Sons. And we know that many of you are familiar with the Prodigal Son, the Bible story from the Gospel of Luke, but we thought that there might be others where it might be a little helpful to have a reminder. So this morning, I'm going to tell the parable of the Prodigal Son. It's a simple story which goes like this. Once there was a man who was a very loving father. He had 2 boys. And the boys knew that when their father died, half of the family wealth would be given to the older son, and the other half would be given to the younger son. But by nature, the younger son was restless and impatient, and he couldn't wait that long. So he went to his father and he said, "Father, I want my part of the inheritance now." The father agreed to his son's request and divided all that he had, and he gave his youngest son half of his estate. Right away, the youngest son sold his half of everything, and he set off to start a new and exciting life in a distant land. He enjoyed himself at first, but in the years that followed, he lived wildly and he spent his money on foolish things until it was all gone. This is how he came to be known as the prodigal son. Because prodigal means wasteful. It means spending money in a reckless, extravagant way. And this is exactly what the youngest son did. He blew it all. Before long, he found himself alone in a strange country with no money and no friends. Then a famine came to the land where he was living. Times were hard, and he had no choice but to go and work for a farmer who needed someone to feed his pigs. Miserable, he would sit and stare at the pigs. He was starving. He was so hungry, in fact, that one day he became tempted to eat the food that the pigs were eating. And that is when he suddenly realized what he had done. His thoughts returned to his home, and he wished desperately that he had never left. Even the servants who worked for his father were better off than he was now. So he got an idea. He decided he would go home and he'd tell his father that he was sorry. He'd ask his father to take him back and give him a job as one of his servants. And with that in mind, the youngest son made the long journey home, barefoot and in rags. Even when he was still a long way off, the father saw his youngest son coming towards the house, and as soon as he saw him, his heart went out to him, and he began to run to him with his arms outstretched, and with tears in his eyes, he flung his arms around his son and hugged him and kissed him. The son cried out, "Oh, Father, I have done wrong against God and against you, and I am so ashamed. I have wasted all of my inheritance, and I no longer deserve to be called your son. I only beg of you to let me just be treated as one of your servants, and let me work for you from now on." The father quickly brushed his son's apologies aside. He held him closer. He kissed him more tenderly. And then the father called to his servants and said, "Quick, bring me my best robe. I want my best robe. I want you to put it on my son. Put a ring on his finger and put sandals on his feet. We will have a great meal with music and dancing. We will eat and be merry. For this is my son who I thought was dead, and now he is alive. And this is my son who was lost, and now he's found." And then there was great happiness in the house. There was feasting and dancing and singing, and there was lots of laughter. And this is where I think the story should end. I like it there. I think it would be nice. But it doesn't end there. While all this celebrating was going on, the other son, the oldest son, was returning home from a hard day's work. And when he learned what was going on, he was furious. So angry, he refused to go into the house. His father came outside and tried to persuade him to join the party. But the oldest son said, "Father, it isn't fair. What have I got to celebrate? Here I am. I have worked hard for you all these years. I have always obeyed your orders, and what do I get? Nothing. You've never given a special feast for me. But that prodigal brother of mine, he took your money and he went away and he wasted his inheritance on parties and drinking, and he went out and he committed every kind of sin. And now, when he comes home with nothing, what do? You celebrate. You give him everything." "Look," said the father, "do not be jealous. It's true. You have been trustworthy. You have stayed with me always, and I am glad of it. Everything I have is yours. You know that. But we thought your brother was dead and gone. He was far, far away from us, and now at last he has come home. We have to celebrate and be happy." And that is where the story ends. And I'm going to turn things over to Gordon and Lynn, who will lead us in our morning offerings. And the children and I are going to leave and go to Sunday school.
Sharing from our abundance. As we know, many, many people need food these days. And so it's very, very important to remember to bring your donations to the church and leave them at the back of the room. We have also decided, in addition to the Sandalwood Food Pantry, that the fourth Sunday of the month we'll be contributing the food to Bluffton Self-Help. Now we will take our offering to sustain this community and the work that we do. If you are a new time guest, please feel free to let the basket pass, as your presence here today is our gift. generosity.
Probably 3 doesn't do it.
Back in my hometown, a little tobacco town called Smithfield, North Carolina, Carl was known as a mama's boy. Now, although he had married and had a son who was my best friend growing up, he couldn't manage to cut his mother's apron strings. He kept returning home to mama, mowing her grass and doing other yard work, fixing things around the house, running errands and other such things. And even though she was perfectly healthy and capable of looking after herself, Carl's inability to decide to which home he belonged cost him his marriage. When he and his wife divorced, he moved back home with mama and waited on her hand and foot until she died many years later. Carl still lives in his mother's home. He never remarried. He literally never left home. Now, I must admit that I can understand Carl to some degree because I too, to some degree, am a mama's boy. Now, I take some comfort in this confession from the fact that 3 of my heroes were mama's boys. Gandhi, Franklin Roosevelt, and Jimmy Carter. And they didn't turn out too badly. Now, when I say I'm a mama's boy, I mean that for whatever reason, my mother's expectations and wishes carried more weight for me than my father's. And I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. Except that my father, like a lot of fathers at the time I was growing up, was generally detached from the life of our family. After he had put in a hard day's work, he figured he had made his contribution to the family and the rest was up to us. But be that as it may, I grew up wanting to please my mother. And that wasn't all bad, because my mother had some worthy expectations of me. She wanted me to be honest and sincere. She wanted me to be reliable and trustworthy. She wanted me to work hard and make something of myself. But most of all, she wanted me to be polite and nice, which is the Southern definition for what it means to be a good Christian. Now, these are good values, and I have no problem with them. The problem is that at some point, the little boy and the little girl have to grow up and decide for themselves what will be their values. Now, they may decide to keep some of mom and dad's values, or they may decide to throw some away, or they may decide to add some that mom and dad never considered. But whatever they decide, they must decide somewhere along the way what belongs to them and what belongs to mom and dad, if they are to be their own man or woman. Now, that may sound like a matter of course, especially to us Unitarians, who are so keen on making our own way. But I suspect that many people never get around to examining their lives and deciding if they're writing their own scripts or if they're living out the scripts written for them by others. Parental expectations are extremely influential over a child's life, and you don't have to be a psychologist to know that. Long before children are capable of questioning their parents' desires and examining their values, children are already being molded by their parents' expectations of how to be in the world. This behavior, but not that, is permissible. These beliefs, but not those, are all right to have. These feelings, but not those, are acceptable. Before we can choose our own way, others have chosen our way for us. Sue Kidd, the writer of several books on spiritual growth, says that when she was 6 years old, someone asked her, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Now, at that time, back in the 50s, living in a small town in Georgia, the only careers open to women were teacher, nurse, secretary, and housewife. And by some process of elimination, Kidd picked nursing. From that moment on, she says, she began to receive little nursing kits for her birthdays. The librarian at school set aside the biography of Florence Nightingale for her. If someone cut their finger, she was called in as the designated bandager. At 16, her parents arranged for her to be a volunteer at the local hospital. Everyone expected her to be a nurse. She was like wet cement being molded by the expectations of others. Indeed, Kidd got her BS degree in nursing and worked 9 years, even teaching nursing at college, before she finally stopped and said to herself, "This is not what I want to do. This is not who I am. I'm not a nurse. There's a writer inside me." By that time, the cement had hardened, and she had some jackhammering to do, breaking up the old name imposed on her and releasing a new identity. You know what is commonly referred to as a midlife crisis is usually nothing more than a person stopping and asking, am I living my life or someone else's? It's not uncommon for people in their 40s and 50s to make a sudden shift in their career or family life because they're breaking up the old names imposed on them by others and releasing their true selves. I suppose I was fortunate in that my mother never tried to push me into a particular career, but she did write a script for me that has carried entirely too much weight in my life, and that script is, don't make waves. Don't say or do anything that might upset or anger another person. And above all, don't get angry yourself. So I'm still learning to be appropriately inconsiderate. And what perfect classmates I have to learn how with a bunch of Unitarians. Whatever your religious background, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Jesus' most renowned story, the parable of the prodigal son, which we heard retold this morning. And you may remember that the parable is a metaphor for an all-loving, all-forgiving God. The father in the parable accepts back home his wayward, rebellious, prodigal son, and he accepts his resentful, judgmental, stay-at-home son as well. But this morning, I don't want to read the parable's theology, however. I want to read its psychology, especially its family dynamics. Now, it's a story not about mama's boys, but about two daddy's boys. In fact, the story didn't even mention a mother, if there was one. This family is like the Cartwright family out on the Ponderosa. You've got Pa and his sons. Now, and if you remember Bonanza, you'll remember there was no mother in that family. And you felt sorry for any female characters that were introduced into the storyline. Because any woman that got mixed up with one of the Cartwright boys, always without fail, ended up blind, crippled, or dead. In the parable, there are two sons. And the older son, in particular, is a daddy's boy. His personality is summed up in one verse in which he says to his father, Lo, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed you. The older son has worked hard at fulfilling his father's expectations. Instead of getting married, raising his own family, and pursuing his own career, he's continued to live at home, carrying on the family business, plowing the fields, grazing the cattle, just like Pa. He's always been there to answer Daddy's every beck and call. And he's never disagreed with his father or pushed his own views, but played the role of the dutiful, obedient son. Now, Daddy's boys and girls, and Mama's boys and girls, always say and do the right thing. Deep down, they don't believe they are loved just as they are. They believe they have to earn their love by pleasing and placating others. The reason the older son is so angry at his younger brother is because this irresponsible brother is being welcomed back home without having to earn his welcome. Older brother types have a hard time with the notion of grace. Like Carl back in my hometown, the older son never left home because he was never at home with himself. He was too focused on fulfilling his father's expectations and desires to know what he expected of and desired for himself. And of course, the parable derives its name from the younger brother, the prodigal son, because he's the center of action. He's the one who leaves the Ponderosa with the adventures in the big wide world beyond. And I think most of us Unitarians can identify with this anti-hero. Many of us left the conventions, politics, and religions of our families to forge our own way. We are a congregation and a denomination of prodigals. One of the reasons we treasure this community is because it provides us with a sense of belonging and acceptance that many of us have never experienced before. The father in the parable says that the younger son, quote, was dead and is now alive, was lost and is found. That could be said of many of us who eventually found Unitarian Universalism. Now, the parable portrays the younger son as being impulsive, immature, and irresponsible. He couldn't wait to receive his inheritance at his father's death. He wanted to spend it now, and spend it he did. The scriptures say that he journeyed to a far country and squandered his inheritance in, quote, loose living. Now, I'm not exactly sure what loose living is, but I'm sure my mother would not approve. So yes, the prodigal was impulsive, immature, and irresponsible. But at least he had the gumption to strike out on his own. And perhaps this is what fueled the older brother's resentment toward him, that he didn't have the guts to do what his younger brother did. Maybe the prodigal left home because he didn't want to be a daddy's boy like his older brother, but wanted instead to be his own person. Or maybe he wanted to be a daddy's boy, but realized he could not compete with his older brother, that he could never be as dutiful and as compliant as he. Whatever his reasons, he left home with his inheritance, and after he had spent it all, the scriptures say that the prodigal, quote, came to himself. He came to himself. Sometimes you have to come to the end of your rope in order to come to yourself. Sometimes you have to exhaust the currency you thought was valuable in order to realize what is truly valuable. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to break the cement of your old name and start writing your own script. Do not think that I have come to bring peace on earth, said Jesus. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes will be those of his own household. How's that for family values? Maybe what Jesus is saying is that in order to be a grown-up, in order to be a mature human being, it's necessary to leave home and become your own person. It's necessary at some point to ask, am I living my life or someone else's? I suspect that more people than we care to know never leave home. From the clothes they wear to the opinions they hold, they would not dream of being out of step with the latest fad or fashion. Whoso would be a man, and we should add, whoso would be a woman, must be a nonconformist. If Emerson is right, then most of us, most of the time, are merely play acting at being a man or woman. Some people never leave home spiritually. They parrot religious beliefs without ever asking, are they relevant to their times or meaningful to their lives? Again, to quote Emerson, they live a, quote, hand-me-down, second-hand religion. Some people mistakenly say the Unitarians have no faith. Nothing could be further from the truth. It takes tremendous faith to believe in yourself, to trust your experience and your inner wisdom, to rely on your perception and judgment, to be true to yourself. Unitarian Universalism is a daring, first-hand faith. So how do you disable a son or daughter so that they are not able to leave home psychologically and spiritually and grow up to be their true self? Well, you do it by mothering and fathering too much. You do it by being overprotective and over-responsible. You do it by seeing your child as an extension of yourself, the same way that some people see their manicured lawns and polished cars as extensions of themselves, rather than regarding your child as a separate person with a separate identity and a separate destiny. I think the most difficult challenge of being a parent, besides having to listen to rap music, would be to have a son or daughter whose personality is different from yours. It would be tempting, so tempting, to try to force them to fit the mold of your personality type instead of honoring the unique personality traits and nurturing them to be who they are as opposed to who you think they should be. And I think it's especially difficult to be an introverted child in an extroverted family. I say this because I am an introvert myself, and we introverts are in the minority in this hyperactive, overstimulated, extroverted society of ours. Only 1 in 4 Americans are introverts. And because we are largely hidden from view by number and nature, we are often misjudged. Our quietness is often mistaken for timidity and insecurity. Our solitude for sullenness or aloofness. One of the reasons that many of us feel at home with Unitarian Universalism is that our congregations have a much higher proportion of introverts than the general population. That is statistically true. I find that interesting. In case you haven't noticed, we youths do analyze and reflect on things excessively before taking action. And that is a common trait of introverts. The purpose of a congregation and of a family is the same: to encourage and support the development of human beings into their true selves. Perhaps the best advice on parenting comes from the poet Khalil Gibran. Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. Amen.
And with the words of Neal ringing in your hearts and in your spirits, take your hymnals out, if you would please, and turn with me to hymn number 138. And may we stand and sing together, These Things Shall Be.
Grace and
speaking style, I have confessed to you a number of times that whenever I speak in front of this congregation, I'm doing therapy on myself. The truth is, when Neal speaks in this congregation, he's doing therapy on me, and I need to send him some fees for that. So Neal, thank you for your heart's journey with that message and the encouragement that all of us took. We thank you so much for it. And I really resonated with the tremendous faith statement that is required of us in this journey, for that is where our faith rests indeed, in finding our trust inside ourselves. So Neal, thank you so much. Those of you who are able to stay for the talk back, even if you're a first-time visitor, we'd encourage you to do so. One of the best ways for you to get to know who we are, how we think, how we are with each other, is in the talk back. Lasts about an hour, 45 minutes, until approximately noon. So I hope that you can stay. Those of you who are regular attenders, you as well, if you would, please. Reverend Jones, if you would, closing remarks.
Our closing words come from Lao Tzu. At the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. Amen.
Please stand as you are willing and able as we extinguish the chalice. While we extinguish this flame, we still carry in our hearts the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment, until we are together again.
Have one of those? You have a star? You gave me one a while ago. I'm not going to stop. Okay, let's see if I can. Let's see.